Okay, thank you so much for joining us this morning for Using Data to Support Family and Child Wellbeing webinar. My name is Kimberly Stewart Lucas, and I'm the Training and Resource Coordinator for PCA Georgia. This webinar is being brought to you today by PCA Georgia in partnership with the Georgia Department of Public Health. At the conclusion of this morning's webinar, I will share with you all on how to receive your certificate of attendance. I am very happy to introduce today's presenter, Grace Morrow. Grace is the Essentials for Childhood PACE 2DA Program Manager and Principal Investigator and Health Educator for the Injury Prevention Program with the Georgia Department of Public Health. Please welcome Grace Morrow.
Thanks, Kimberly. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I hope that you are all doing well on this here in Atlanta, very gray, dreary day. It's kind of disappointing after the nice weather that we had over the weekend. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I'm hoping that this presentation will be useful for you. Essentially, I've got about 19 slides, and then I have some things online that I want to show you all. If you have questions, please feel free to write them in the chat. I will try to kind of pay attention to that as I'm going, but I do have time scheduled for us to talk sort of after I'm done talking. And if you have questions like about specific data interests or types of data that you want to find, this is a great place to ask that too. So I'm trying to leave plenty of time for us to be able to talk about that if you'd like. All right, so making data work for you. The point of this presentation is I want to try to make it easier for folks who maybe don't have a background in epidemiology or biostatistics to understand how to choose data, how to access data, and how to determine if the data that you are looking at is appropriate for whatever your data question is. And then I want to make sure that you know of some high quality, reliable data sources that are specific to Georgia that you can utilize. So I will be going over the data source that my grant, the Essentials PACE grant, has created. And then I will also go over a data hub that Georgia Essentials for Childhood has recently created as well. And those are all data sources that I fully support and would recommend, utilizing in your everyday work. So I wanted to make sure you had an idea of where some high quality data can be found. So the objectives are up on there. The only one that I didn't mention is I want to make sure that you also understand, in addition to learning about the data tool that the Essentials PACE grant provides, what it is that we're trying to do with the grant, and how you can reach out to us to assist you with any data needs that you may have. Okay, so first I want to do some level setting. These are some key definitions that I want us all to sort of have the same idea of what they are. We will not spend too much time on this because my assumption is going to be that most of you know what these are. So the first one is ACEs, or Adverse Childhood Experiences. Simplest definition for this is potentially traumatic events that occur in childhood. Research has shown us that ACEs can have a long-term negative impact on our health, ranging from things to an increased risk of diabetes to increased risky sexual behavior, all that kinds of stuff. The next definition of positive childhood experiences. So PCEs are newer within the field of ACEs and child and family well-being. We've been talking about them for years, but we didn't call them PCEs. But essentially, what you want to think of a PCE is that it's the reverse of an ACE, right? So it's an experience during childhood that promotes safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments. Um, the research on PCEs is still relatively new, so it's not quite like with ACEs, where, there's been decades of research on ACEs and how they affect us, and we kind of have an agreed upon set of 10 ACEs. And then there's sort of an expanded idea of how adverse community events can also impact us and are considered ACEs as well. It's not like that with PCEs. If you were to Google it, you would see different definitions. There isn't necessarily that core list of this is kind of universally what all the researchers agree on as are PCEs. But the one thing that PCEs are essentially is they're really focused on building strong relationships between children and other people. So children and other children, children and family members, children and adults in their family, children and teachers, etc., etc. If you are interested in learning more about PCEs, I have a whole other presentation on them. And then I also have a lot of resources and research papers that I can send you that you can take a look at if you want to learn more about sort of this emerging aspect of child and family well-being. Next definition is risk factors. A risk factor is essentially what it sounds like. So that is a characteristic, a behavior, an element, or a factor that will increase an individual's chance of developing an adverse health outcome. So, and there are types of risk factors for literally every adverse health outcome that there is. So this isn't just a definition that you will see used in the child and family well-being space. It's also something that you would see if you were to learn about cancer or diabetes or automobile accidents, that kind of thing. Protective factors, the reverse of a risk factor. So it's essentially an element, a behavior, characteristic that will prevent you or help prevent you, mitigate that risk of experiencing an adverse health outcome, and also increase your likelihood of having a positive health outcome. And then social determinants of health. Pretty simple. These are everything that is not a medical factor that has an impact on our health and well-being. So this would include things like economic stability, community resources, transportation, things like that. So things that are strictly not medical. The reason why I'm kind of going over these definitions is because when we're talking about data related to child abuse and neglect, these one, two, three, four, five, these five sort of definitions are really the types of data that you're going to be looking at. So you're going to look at ACE data, you're going to look at PCE data, you'll look at risk factors for ACEs, that's a form of data, and protective factors, and then you'll also be looking at social determinants of health that are related to child abuse and neglect. I'm going to really briefly go over what it is that I do in order to earn a living. So I am as Kimberly mentioned, I am the project manager and also the principal investigator of the Essentials for Childhood Preventing ACEs Through Data to Action grant. It is a very long title, so in Georgia we shorten it to Essentials PACE because it's a lot easier. You may have also heard of this grant be called the PACES grant or the PACE D2A grant. All of that is fine. It's all talking about me and the team that I work with. And the purpose of this grant is to build upon the resources and partnerships that currently exist in Georgia to build a surveillance infrastructure on data for ACEs and PCEs, make that available to anyone in the child and family well-being space in the state, and then encourage the utilization of that data in implementing strategies to reduce ACEs and promote PCEs. Now as like a kind of really large overview of the grant, we've got three focus areas that we're trying to do. The first is obviously maintaining our ACE surveillance infrastructure. So that really refers to the website that I'm going to show you in a little bit and the creation of all of our data products, and then doing things like this. So providing people with technical assistance around data and access to different types of data and answering any questions that folks might have. The second component of the grant is utilizing the data that we have in our infrastructure to implement evidence-based practices. So our grant requires that we focus on two different evidence-based practices. So we are working on promoting social norms that protect against violence and adversity by supporting findhelpgeorgia.org. You may be familiar with Find Help Georgia. That is a resource that you can utilize to look up services for almost any type of assistance that you or clients that you work with or people in your community might need. So we're trying to help increase the use of findhelpgeorgia.org. If you want to learn more about that, you can definitely reach out to Kimberly, and yet Kimberly put it in the chat. Thanks, Kimberly. Find Help GA is incredible. If you're not familiar with it, you definitely want to be, and you want to make sure that your organization is properly represented on that website. Now, the second thing that we're doing is we are trying to ensure a strong start for children by providing social determinants of health data for home visitation programs. So what that looks like is we are so close to creating 159 county profiles. So one profile for every single county in the state and an overarching state profile on the needs of home visiting across the state. So we're looking at ACEs data, PCE data, risk factors, protective factors, but mostly we're focusing on social determinants of health. And the idea is that these profiles can be utilized so that home visitation programs will be able to advocate to their partners or funders on where they want to expand or what the needs of a specific county might be with regards to home visitation, but also so that stakeholders within counties themselves can take a look at the profile and have a better understanding of what their county specific home visiting needs might be, and then to be able to identify and choose the best home visiting program to meet those needs. So like I said, we're really close to having those done. It's been a huge lift, but we're very excited about it. And then the third component of our grant is the data to action piece. So data to action is it's really just a framework for the way that I would describe it is it's kind of a framework for evaluation and monitoring. It comes out of the field of violence prevention, specifically within the intimate partner violence research community. If you would like to learn a lot more about that framework, I can actually send you the original paper that discusses it and outlines it. It's free and available to read on the internet. You can also, if you don't want to talk to me anymore, which I would get, would be to just type in data to action framework and then intimate partner violence into Google and it should pop up. But essentially the way that this framework the purpose of this framework is to make sure that we are being iterative and including the end audience for our products in our processes. So folks like yourselves, people that work in the child and family well-being space, your needs and the work that you're doing, the entire purpose of this grant is to support you in what you're doing. So we want to make sure that we are hearing from you in terms of what types of data you need, what kind of data products would be helpful. And so we rely a lot on feedback that you all present in order to make changes to our grant so that we're better suiting your needs. So I hope that that kind of makes sense. That's really in a nutshell what the data to action framework enables us to do. It's just a very rapid form of feedback and monitoring on our projects. So that's the overview of the grant. If you want to learn more, you can send me an email. I can talk to you about it for hours and hours because I've been running the grant for 4 or 5 years now. So there's so much more that I could tell you. If you're interested in any of the projects that we're working on, you want to learn more about them, you want to make sure that you have access to those resources, again, feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to meet with you one-on-one or chat over email. So now let's talk about the actual fun stuff. So let's start talking about data. For the record, I am not a epidemiologist or a biostatistician. I am just a program manager. I'm a person. One of the main points of our grant is to make sure that data is accessible to people who might not have that background in epi or in biostatistics. And really to let people know that you don't have to have those things in order to understand data, in order to really use data to your advantage. So that's one of the reasons why I always do these kinds of presentations, because again, I have taken classes in epi, I've taken classes in biostatistics, but I, kind of took the bare minimum in order to get my MPH for those. Um, so when you are trying to think about data and what data you might need for your work or a project that you're focusing on, you really want to ask yourself a series of questions before you start looking for that data. So this slide is kind of about that. It's about getting started. And really, the more time you spend thinking about these questions and answering them, the better your data, the more likely, the better data you'll be able to find, and the more useful that data will be for you. Um, the other thing that you'll probably notice is that these questions, once you sort of take something into practice and you start asking them to yourselves, will lead to more questions, which is a good thing. And it's something that I would recommend you and your team, maybe you'll pick a topic and you'll just try to ask these questions amongst yourselves and answer them, and you can sort of write them all down, write down additional questions that you may have and try to answer those. But eventually, if when you are looking for data or you're trying to figure out what type of data you need for something, you should be able to run through most of these questions mentally, or just have a simple conversation with any of your partners in your team to then sort of move forward. So this is a habit that I would recommend that you get into. You might find that you want to add a different question or take away one of the questions that I have here. These are just the questions that I always ask myself and that I ask our team. So the first question would be, what's your topic? So what is it that you're trying to learn about, that you're interested in? Are you trying to understand about children's nutrition and how that's associated with child abuse and neglect? Are you trying to learn about children's educational attainment within school? Are you trying to learn about home visiting programs? So just you want to be able to establish what your overall topic is that you want to learn more about. And then you want to actually think about what is the question that you're trying to answer for that topic. You will most likely have multiple questions. That's fine, and you probably should. But you want to be able to write down specifically, this is what I'm interested in learning. And the reason why you want to differentiate between the topic that you're interested in and the questions that you're asking is because the topic and the questions, two totally different things. You can ask an infinite number of questions about any topic and still not be able to find the answers or the data that you're looking for in order to do what it is that you want to do. So you really want to make sure that you have a clear question in mind. So an example of this, right, could be someone could say that they are interested in learning about poverty. That is a really big factor when we're talking about child abuse and neglect, ACEs and PCEs. A lot of people reach out to ask for data related to economic stability and poverty. And it's a great thing to want to learn about. It's definitely something that you want to consider when you're creating programming or when you are looking for funders or grants, things like that. Um, what you want to remember, though, is that poverty is a huge field, right? And there are any number of things within that that you could be interested in. And what I find is a lot of times when I meet with people who are looking for technical assistance, they'll say, oh, we want data related to poverty. And then I'll say, well, what kind of data are you looking for related to poverty? And then they won't know. And that's fine because they haven't thought about these questions, right? So that's why you really want to think about what your specific question is going to be, because I can give you all kinds of data about poverty. I can give you I can give you the number of children living in poverty in Georgia. I can give you the number or the percentage of people overall in Georgia living in poverty. Those are two very different things, and that might not even be what it is that you're interested in anyway about poverty. I'm hoping that that makes sense. That's why you really want to think about what are the questions that you're interested in answering, and you'll probably find that your questions will change over time, and that's okay. You can always restart this thought exercise, this thought cycle, and data is kind of very much a rabbit hole, and that once you start asking questions, you'll just have more and more questions. But that's a good thing. You want to be asking questions. You want to increase your knowledge so that you can really do the best for your community and your target audience. So the next thing, after you've got your topic and after you've got one or two questions that you're like, this is what I want to know about this topic, is you need to stop and say, why am I asking this specific question? And that's because you want to make sure that the question that you are asking or the questions that you're asking align with what your end goal is, right? So you want to be able to explain what is it that these questions are going to give me that will help me do X, Y, or Z. I hope that that makes sense. So take some time to reevaluate your questions, make sure that you can always explain to yourself, and as long as you feel like you can justify it to yourself, that's more than enough reason to move forward with the question. But you want to make sure that you can explain, why am I asking this question? Why is this question important to me? Now, the next thing after you've gone through your existential crisis with the questions or questions that you're asking is to try to figure out, is your question answerable? So there are a lot of questions and there is a lot of data. Unfortunately, there is not data to answer every question. So this is probably the most frustrating part of utilizing data or looking for data, is learning that a question that you have, which is a completely valid question, but there is no data that directly answers that question. That's actually going to happen more often than not. You just got to get over that right now. So an example of this could be, let's say that you want to actually, there's a question that I know 100% is not answerable right now that you would think would be for here in Georgia. And that question would be, what is the percentage of children in Georgia that experience uh, mental illness within their home? That's a classic ACE question. Um, we actually don't have an answer to that question for right now. And you might think, that doesn't make any sense. But it's true, because you have to think about, what is it that you need in order to answer that question. You have to be asking kids that question, right? You need to be asking youth. And there's a difference between asking a question like that to someone in primary school to asking a question like that to someone in high school. We have questions that are related to that. We have questions that are risk factors or protective factors when we're talking about the ACE in the mental illness in the home ACE, but we don't actually have a data source in Georgia that currently directly asks that question to students. We used to, that was the Youth Behavioral Risk Factor Survey, the YRBS. You may be familiar with that. Georgia is no longer conducting the YRBS. And the last few years that we have conducted the YRBS, where it actually does ask the 10 specific ACE questions, the data that we've been able, or the participation that our participation rates weren't actually high enough to be able to answer all of those questions. So that's what I really mean by, is your question answerable? And you probably won't know that from the get-go, and that's why you want to spend your time really thinking about, what is it that you're trying to do with the information that your question is going to give you? Because if you run into this situation, which you will, that is a given, at some point you're going to ask a question that there is not an answer to, and well, that there isn't existing data to provide that answer. So you want to be able to say, well, what's the next best thing? What's the next best thing that I can ask to get me this answer? So the data that you get might be slightly different, but it's going to be closer to not knowing anything about that question overall. So again, if we're talking about the example of um, the percentage of youth in Georgia who experience some form of mental illness or within the home. Again, we don't have a direct question for that, but what we do have are questions from the Georgia Student Health Survey, which will soon be switched to the Georgia School Climate Survey, that ask questions about children's overall experience with anxiety or with depression and those kinds of things. And so you can ask those questions and get that data and utilize that to try to reach your goal. I'm hoping that this makes sense. These concepts are always a little bit harder without sort of a concrete problem that we're trying to address, which is why I've left room at the end of the presentation for us to go through one if any of you have one that you'd like to bring up. Um, so yeah, so following after is your question answerable. Next question is a sort of a logical thing, which is, does other data relevant to your questioning exist? So we've kind of pretty much already talked about that, but you want to think, if I can't answer this, is this close enough? Or maybe you can answer that question. Maybe we do know the answer to that question. There is a specific data indicator for it, but that might not, but that might mean that it's still helpful to know what other data is available that's related to your question. And then finally, you want to be able to say, what am I going to be able to do with this data? How is this data going to be helpful for me? Why is it worth to put my time and my effort into answering this question? And what are my plans for utilizing it? So these are just sort of the basic questions that I would recommend you ask yourself when you are trying to find data or are thinking about data that you may or may not need. You don't necessarily have to ask these questions in this specific order. You could start off with um, what will I do with this data when I get it, and sort of work your way backwards from there. It's not necessarily, it's an iterative cycle. So just think about that. There isn't necessarily a wrong way to perform this exercise. Moving on. So after you have decided, okay, this is my question, this is what I want to do with my question, this is why my question is important. Here are some other pieces of data that, if they exist, might be helpful to my question if the data for my question doesn't exist. So after that, you have to think, okay, now where do I find this data? How do I choose a data set to help me answer this question? So this slide is really just, these are some bare minimum considerations. Anytime you are looking at any data point or data indicator, you need to be able to answer these questions about that data point in order to, again, at a bare minimum, understand what it is that the data is telling you. So you need to be able to identify who was asked this question. Who was the target audience? Were these adults? Were they children? Were they children of a specific race or ethnicity? Were they children in specific age groups? Were they children that experience a specific type of were they children that, or were they children who are immigrants to the United States? Those kinds of things. You want to be able to say specifically, this is who is asked these questions, so this is who this data point is talking about and representing. A lot of times, especially when we're talking about ACE and PCE data, we are actually asking adults about their experience retroactively. So we're asking adults about the ACEs or the PCEs that they experienced growing up, and they're reflecting on them as adults. Or we are asking adults to answer questions about ACEs and PCEs for their children. So none of that information, it's valuable information. It's really helpful. It answers a lot of questions for us, but that's not actually asking children those specific questions. So you need to make sure that you know who the survey talked to whenever you are looking to a data point. Um, And I'll kind of show an example in the next slide of a survey that oftentimes people refer to. It's a great survey. I absolutely love it. But people will then equate that with being children are saying this, when it's not actually children, it's adults. The next thing that you want to think about or you want to be able to identify is how was this data collected? Was it a online survey? Was it a phone call survey? Is it related to the census? Is it administrative data? So is this like you looked at an attendance record for your local school district, that kind of thing. You want to be able to say, okay, this is the type of data that this is. This is sort of the field or the overall realm of this data. The next thing that you want to be able to ask yourself is how recent is this data? How often are these data collected? What is that time difference between now and when the data was last collected? And you also want to be looking to see, is this data point, is this talking about only one instance in time, right? So is this data point that I'm looking at from the 2021 Georgia Student Health Survey, which then is giving us a snapshot of what was going on in 2021? Or is this data that is combined years of a survey? So, am I actually looking at Georgia Student Health Survey data that's been combined together and the analysis has been redone to talk about what has been going on in the state from 2019 to 2024? Two very different things, right? One of them provides a snapshot at a specific moment in time. The other one is a combined data set is closer to talking about what a trend is. So it's something that's a little bit more reliable that you can talk about. It's more stable. And then the last thing that you're going to want to ask is, what is the geographic area that this data is talking about? So the other kind of way of thinking about this is, what's the sample size or what's the coverage? You might be familiar with those terms if you've ever taken if you've ever conducted a survey or something like that. So this is because one of the things that we've really noticed as we have done our grant is that folks want data that is local to them. People want to be able to say, this is what's happening in my county. This is what's happening in my school district. This is what's happening in my neighborhood. And that is valid. And honestly, for a lot of the work that you all are doing, or that the work that we're trying to support across the state, it really is work that's being done at a local level. So having data at that local level is really valuable, because that's how you're going to be able to get your local business folks, your local politicians, your local social organizations interested and involved, because you can say, this is what's happening specifically in our community. So you want to make sure that when you're looking at a data point or a data indicator, that you can say, this is the specific geographical area that it's talking about. So you want to be able to say, so some examples of this, they're listed. A lot of times you'll have data that's talking about Georgia as a whole state. That's great. But like I said, most people are looking for data that's specific to their local community. So you might look instead for data that's related to a region that you're involved in. Maybe you work a lot with DFACs, and so the way that you think about your community is by DFACs region, or conversely, maybe it's the Department of Public Health's districts that you use. Maybe you work on a county level. Maybe you work in a school district or a school enrollment boundary. Those are two different things. Although for the most part, in Georgia, the data is kind of at the same level. Or maybe you are really, really specific. You're like, I live and work in Mechanicsville in Atlanta, and that is the community, that's the area that I want data on. So then you're going to want to be looking for census tract or block level or block data. That's just a very fancy way of saying essentially the smallest piece of data that you can get into. So census tracts are, sometimes they encompass a neighborhood, sometimes they encompass multiple neighborhoods, but it's a really small unit. It's small, you can kind of it's not necessarily, but you can kind of think of it like a zip code almost. But a census tract and zip codes are not the same thing. But a lot of times you'll find data that is presented by zip code, and that can be useful as well. So you really want to be able to, anytime you're looking at a data indicator, say, I can answer all of these questions, because this is the bare minimum of what you need to know in order to be able to say, okay, this is what that data indicator is telling me. So we'll go through an example of this. So one of the most important data resources that we have on child abuse and neglect, on ACEs, on PCEs now in the state of Georgia is BRFIS, or the Georgia Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance Survey. Just call it BRFIS for short, saves everybody a lot of time. BRFIS is a very reliable survey. It is done in terms of asking the ACE questions, it's done roughly every other year. It asks questions related to social determinants of health. It asks questions about overall health outcomes, about health behaviors. There's a lot of really wonderful and rich data that we have that comes from BRFIS. However, BRFIS is not the be all end all. It's not going to be able to answer all the questions that you may have. So let's try to talk about the sort of these bare minimum of knowledge that you need to know about a data indicator in order to be able to talk about it. So if you're looking at a data point and it says it's from BRFIS, what we know is that this is going to be talking about adults within the state of Georgia. That's what BRFIS is. It is people age 18 and up in the state of Georgia. That's who's being asked these questions. How is this data collected? This is a phone survey that's done by random dialing. And another thing to add on top of this is to kind of understand how many people roughly were asked these questions. This is because when we're talking about the geographical area that a data indicator or a piece of data is talking about, you can sometimes go bigger or smaller based off of how many people you were able to survey. So for BRFIS, for example, we can talk about the state with BRFIS. So we can talk about things at a state level, or we can talk about things at a regional level. BRFIS doesn't, the amount of people that are asked the survey does not represent things at a county level or anything beneath a regional level. And even some of the regions, not all, sometimes you may have some, like if the way that you divide the state up is by like 50 different regions, we're probably not going to be able to give you the BRFIS data based off of 50 different regions within the state. But what we can provide you with, what is a valid way of utilizing BRFIS data, is talking about the data at a DFACS regional level, a DPH regional level. You can probably do it for a DECAL regional level as well. Anything beneath that, the data is not going to be of a high enough quality to give you the proper picture. So if you decide I'm going to use this to talk about my county instead, you can technically do that, but you're not actually fully talking about your county. You're talking about a lot more people than who are just in your county. So you want to make sure that you understand what is the smallest and the largest geographical area that this data can talk about in order to utilize it responsibly. And then another thing that I added down at the bottom, in case you're not familiar with BRFIS, is typically these are the things that people within our line of work use BRFIS, what they use BRFIS to look at. So ACEs, again, in adults, because we're asking this of adults to think back retroactively. And then we're asking about their health conditions that are related with ACEs. A fun new thing, in the last version of BRFIS, where we asked the ACE questions, we also asked 3 positive childhood experience questions. And that data, we should be able to make that data publicly available probably next fall. So moving forward, the intention is to continue to ask these 3 PCE questions. So we're going to have some direct PCE level data amongst adults in the state, which is going to be really exciting. Now, I'm not going to go through this chart individually because that would be boring and would kind of not be the best use of time. But I wanted to provide you with some overall indicators that are one, data points that are available for Georgia specifically that I know are available at a high quality level for Georgia, but also that are really relevant when we're talking about child and family well-being. So in this table, I have it sort of divided by CDC strategy. So if you're not familiar, CDC has a number of technical packages that sort of list various different evidence-based strategies for addressing youth violence, ACEs, child abuse, neglect, child and family well-being, all those sorts of things. If you are interested in getting any of those technical packets, you can look them up on CDC's website, or because the website is going through changes, if you're having trouble finding them, you can email me and then I can email the ones that I think you would be interested to because I have them all downloaded. But these strategies are the ones that my grant specifically looks at. So strengthening economic supports to families, promoting social norms, ensuring a strong start, teaching children and parents skills, connecting youth to caring adults, and then intervening to alleviate immediate or long-term harms. So next to that, I have listed, these are data indicators that speak specifically to each of these. It's very simple. Most of the indicators are appropriate to talk about almost all of the evidence-based strategies, except for strengthening economic supports to families. Those data indicators are a little bit different, so that's why they're separated. So if you are trying to figure out somewhere to start, you've got your topic, but you're a little overwhelmed, come and look here and try to see, is your topic related to any of these evidence-based strategies, which are fairly self-explanatory, but again, you can look up what those strategies are on the CDC website, or I can email you a technical package. And then you might want to be able to start with one of these data indicators. And like I said, I know for a fact that all of these data indicators are available mostly because my grant can provide all of them for you. So I know that we can get these data pieces to you if you'd like them. I see that someone asked me for my email. I will put my email in the chat, or maybe Kimberly, you could put it in the chat because Kimberly and she unfortunately has to deal with emailing me. But then my email will also be at the end of the presentation too. And these slides will be available in PDF form for you all. You can email me and I can send them to you, or you can reach out to PCA and then they can send them to you as well. So don't feel like you need to be frantically writing these things down. A lot of these slides I created so that you can reference them back later, because I am not expecting you to remember most of what I'm talking about because I'm giving you a lot of information. So my hope is that I'll kind of explain these things, and then when you're like, oh, I had to listen to that one lady talk at me for like an hour about data, let me go look at her slides. And then as you look at the slides, you'll kind of remember what we've talked a little bit about today. So feel free to refer back to these and use them as tools for you when you're looking, when you're trying to answer your data questions in the future. So my project, the Essentials PACE grant, has created a data mapping tool. This is the link to that. That will also be dropped in the chat. I will do that myself. And I'm going to show you the data mapping tool, and I'm going to show you how to use it, and I'm going to show you some of the other pieces on our website related to data that are helpful. If for whatever reason you lose the link, or you don't get the PDF for these and you don't know what the link is, if you want to find this, all you have to do is go to Google and type in iPrice Georgia PACE and it will pop up. I will type that in the chat so you can copy it. And then you can actually just type that into Google right now. And then it should pop up as either the first or second link. But before I transition to showing you the web page, I'm going to talk with you a little bit about what's available on the web page, and then I have some slides that you can refer back to when you're trying to, again, figure out, does this web page have data that's going to be helpful for me? So first, the overall content of the website, we've got information about the Essentials PACE grant. Currently on the website, it's still called the PACE D2A grant in some places. We're doing a huge overhaul of the website in the next couple of weeks, and we'll actually have, oh, thank you so much, Kimberly, for putting that up there. Kimberly just dropped the website link into the chat, so you can bookmark it right now if you don't already have it. Um, yeah, we'll be doing a whole overhaul of the website, which we'll talk about in a few slides. Our mapping tool is located on the website. We have some pre-generated maps related to ACEs that we think overall are important for people to know. So those are there for you to utilize. We have regional fact sheets divided by DFACS region of like an overall profile of what ACEs look like within that region. And then we also have a fact sheet for each DFACS region that talks about Georgia's Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Plan. It's a whole other thing that we can talk about later, but some of you may or may not be familiar with it. It's a state action plan around preventing child abuse and neglect. We are helping Georgia Essentials implement that plan across the state. It's a 10-year plan. And so we really try to sort of base our initial data products off of what's going on with that plan. So that's why we have fact sheets related to it. Then we also have an archive of our fact sheets and our maps. We update them almost on a yearly basis, sometimes more than once a year, but we do make sure that previous versions are still available to folks if they want to be able to check those out. So we've got an archive. Then we also have a community resource list. And then we have information about our data sources, which you should always be looking at when you are trying to find a piece of data. You want to be able, again, to answer those questions that we talked about earlier. Now, the next thing, this is a list of the data sources, the years, and then the data owners or data partner that we utilize on the Essentials PACE website. So we don't actually, as of right now, do any surveys ourselves. We are very fortunate that we have a lot of strong partnerships and that there's a lot of data that is publicly available, or you could just send an email and get that data available upon request. And so our website is really about putting a lot of that data related to ACEs and PCEs in one place for you to be able to look at. So this chart shows you these are all data sources that are available on the website, and then it will provide you with the years of the data that is or will be available. So you may be looking at these and saying, like, why is it saying that there's going to be data or that there's data on the website from 2028? That hasn't happened yet. That's because that's how long our grant is currently set to go through until the end of 2020 or until halfway through 2028. So we will have access to that data when it comes into existence. This is so that you can remember in the future, okay, 2 years from now, I need to go back, recheck this data point. I know that they're going to have the latest version of BRFIS, or they're going to have that version of BRFIS from 2025, that kind of thing. That's why it's listed like that. And then if you want to, and then the data owner is listed on the side in case you want to reach out to them. That's just also a good thing to know, is who owns this data, who's collecting it, because you can go directly to their websites to learn more about the data. Now this is a beautiful little flow chart of these same data sets listed here, but organized by the population that they provide data on. Another way to, again, when you were thinking about your audience, or when you're trying to think about your data questions that you're asking, you want to know who is this data talking about? This is a quick way for you to look at reliable data sources for the state of Georgia that we have on our website that can tell you about these things. So to be clear, we see that at the start, we're talking about infants. Infants are not answering the American Community Survey. They are not taking that survey. Their parents are, or adults in their households are, so they're answering questions about infants or for infants. So this doesn't show you who the survey questioned. It shows you who the data is about. So I hope that makes sense. So you can refer back to this in the future. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is a list of highly requested data indicators that are available on the website. So we've got ACE indicators. So these are things that are actual ACEs or that are close to ACEs. We've got social determinants of health that are related to ACEs, and then we have ACE risk and protective factors. So all of these different data points or data points related to these topics when we're talking about social determinants of health are available on the website. So you can refer back to this as a quick cheat sheet for the types of data or for the what of the data on our website. So you don't have to remember it yourself. For the future, we update our data mapping tool a lot. Again, I mentioned that we're doing a complete overhaul of the website because in addition to our mapping tool, we're actually going to have some traditional data dashboard features. So you might be like, maps are kind of nice, but I would really love a bar graph or something like that. We're going to have that available probably within the next 6 weeks is when that's going to launch. So very exciting. Again, we update our ACE fact sheets every year. We are also working on a data literacy training series where we are planning on hosting in-person or live data training. So either physically in person or live like we're doing now, where it's like a Zoom meeting, but then we're also going to be creating on-demand data literacy resources. So things that are pre-recorded, kind of like HR style things that you can look into. Those sort of pre-recorded things are wonderful. They're a great place to reaffirm information that you've been given before or help you with a starting place. But what's most likely going to happen is if you sort of utilize those sort of on-demand videos, you will probably come away with more questions. So that's why you want to make sure to reach out to us with what those questions are. Part of what we do for the grant is providing technical assistance. So you can email me or on the mapping tool website, there is an email that you can also reach out to. It doesn't matter which one. The team will have it, and then we're happy to meet with you. You are never bothering us with a data question. There is no question that you can ask us that we will think is silly or an undeserving question. That doesn't exist in this realm of data. So please feel free to reach out to us. Happy to assist you in any way that we can. Utilize the fact that I do have a statistician and an epidemiologist that work on this data. So please use that to your advantage and reach out to us when you have questions. And then we'll be adding additional community resources to the website in the future. So let's take a look at the website. So this is it. When you go to the link or type in what I put into Google in the chat, this is what's going to pop up. Our website is hosted at Emory University by the Injury Prevention Research Center at Emory. While the grant lives within the Georgia Department of Public Health, our data products are posted on Emory's website because it's easier for us to make more quicker changes to them than if it were to be hosted on a DPH website. So that's why you'll see this here. I'll go through the website really quickly, then we'll take a look at the mapping tool. This has some information about the grant, so you can read through that. This is an email that you can send if you don't want to email me because for whatever reason, but you still want to get some technical assistance around data, you can email the iPrice email address and we'll be able to get back to you. This is the link to the data mapping tool. So you click on this and the mapping tool pops up. This is a survey about our data mapping tool. Like I said before, we want to know what works for you and what doesn't. The survey will take you like 3 minutes to fill out. It's 11 questions, most of which are multiple choice. So please, 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 if you use our mapping tool, take this survey because we want to make sure that we're giving you what it is that you need. Otherwise, we're putting a lot of effort into something that won't be helpful. So you're not going to hurt our feelings by telling us that you don't like something or that you want to see something else. Don't worry about that. Down here, we have a video recording of a data literacy presentation we did a few years ago. If you watch this, you'll see that there are some similar slides between what we went over today and what's here, but there's a lot more that's in this data literacy presentation, so feel free to watch this. If you don't want to watch this, because you're like, I don't want to watch a YouTube video, we've got the main overall concepts that are listed down here that you can check out instead. Here are some of the maps that we have pre-generated that we think are helpful. You just click on one down here, and then you can download the map, and there you go. This is overall data on ACEs in Georgia, so this is all at the state level, so this is a good thing to reference. This is all from BRFUS, so the survey that we talked about earlier. Down here, we have our fact sheets that I mentioned, our regional fact sheets. This is the archive. These are community resources and partners that we recommend you look at. And then down here is a PDF that talks about each of our data sources. So this is the overall web page. It's not going to look super different, except there will be a new space added for our data dashboard in the next couple of weeks, and then we're going to clean up some language, stuff like that. Now, this is our mapping tool. This is done using ArcGIS. You do not have to download ArcGIS. You do not have to log into anything. You literally click this link and then boom, the web page pops up. Now, ArcGIS is it's doing a lot of work here in the background, so it can take some time for it to load. Just let it do its thing. Go to the bathroom, make a cup of tea, get some water, whatever, give it some time to load. But this is the screen that you're going to have as soon as it loads. So you can see here that we've got our beautiful state of Georgia that's outlined here. Over here on the left-hand side, this kind of white tab here, when you click on something, a data point to look at, the information about that data point is going to appear here. So this is your legend. So if you're familiar with utilizing like maps, like if you like to look at maps, maps have a legend. They explain to you what it is that different symbols mean, that kind of stuff. That's essentially what's going on over here. You can expand or narrow this tab as you desire. So you just click this. And then over here, these are the different data points that you can add on the mapping tool. So sometimes you might open the mapping tool and there's nothing over here, but you can access all the data points by this little folder over here in the top right-hand corner. So first, the way that you want to think about the mapping tool is that if you are of a certain age, I don't know, I don't have children, maybe they still do this in school, you might be familiar with an overhead projector that your teachers used to teach you things, where they'll have like one clear sheet of paper and it'll have like it'll have like a math problem on it. And then as you were learning how to multiply or divide or whatever, they would take other clear sheets of paper and put it on top of that original clear sheet of paper to show you sort of like an overarching process. That's the same thing. That's exactly what's happening here. You want to think of this map of Georgia that we have as the base layer, and then you are adding additional sheets on top of one another. So I always recommend with adding a boundary layer, we're just going to add counties here because that's the one that I always like to show when I'm doing examples. So you can see we've got a lot of different layers here that you can click. You can overlap layers. If you want to do that, that's fine. But you know, that can get a little visually can be a little overwhelming. So I clicked counties. So let's take a look at the county level data that we have. So we've got data at a regional level, a county level, a census tract level, a school district level, and a school boundary level. The Child Opportunity Index data is available at a census tract level, I believe is what this is, but we're going to check out our county level data. So you click that, boom, here are all the different data points that you can look at a county level. And let's take a look at anxiety. So this is from the Georgia Student Health Survey. I click it, boom, everything pops up. We've got our little legend over here that explains what it is that the data point is talking about. So this is where you would go to answer a lot of those questions that we were talking about before when we're thinking about picking a data set. So this data indicator talks about the overall percentage of students who report having experienced intense anxiety, worries, or fears that got in the way of daily activities within the past 30 days on the Georgia Student Health Survey from the years 2018 through 2024. So that will answer a good number of the questions that you have. You will notice this did not answer who were asked these questions. That's why you want to make, even though Georgia Student Health Survey, that's administered to youth, but unless you know that off the top of your head, this does not actually tell you who was asked these questions. It just tells you who the data is talking about. So that's why you want to make sure that you can Google the data source to figure out who was asked the questions. And then, yeah, you just get your little legend over here that shows you the percentage rates. What you can also do is hover and click on a county that you're interested in, and then you will get the specific rate for that county. So Cobb County, 34.96% of children in Cobb County, or of the children that were surveyed in Cobb County, had experienced anxiety within the last 30 days of when they took the survey. That's what this data point is telling you. You'll also notice that there will kind of be there might be other like pieces of information on the county level. Can you look at specific zip codes? So we don't have zip code data up here for this. Most of the data, most of the surveys that we have data from aren't asking like don't consider zip code as a geographical distribution that they want to look into. That's why if you want something that's smaller than a county, which is very understandable, you'd want to look at something at the census tract level. So as an example of our census tract levels, we have less data at the census tract. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Georgia Student Health Survey data, that does not go down to the census tract. We can get that down to school level and school boundary, but we can't get it lower than that. So here, an example, this is a piece of data that we get a lot, is people asking about poverty. You can look at poverty at a census tract level. And it's the same thing if you zoom in on a county that you're interested in. So here, let's look at, well, that's not interesting because Wilkinson County is all one census tract. But if we look here at Jones County, we can see that there are at least four or more different census tract levels that are within that. So you can kind of use this to try to narrow things down. But again, if you're looking at data on the census tract level and you're not sure what this is talking about, send us an email, reach out to us, and then we can try to either help um, explain that better to you, or we don't post all of the data that we have, or all of the geographic levels that the data can be presented at on the mapping tool. So it is possible that you are looking, if you're looking for a piece of data, but you want it at a different geographical level, that we will be able to do that for you. So just email us and then we can tell you if that's possible. And if so, then we will get that done and email it to you. Now, one last thing to note about this, you may think to yourself, maps are pretty. That's a nice color blue that I like, but I am actually not interested in having a map where I have to click on the county that I'm interested in. I just want to be able to look at a Excel sheet with the county information. That is also possible through the mapping tool. So down here, we have another little tab, this sort of dark colored tab. If you click that, you will get, eventually, it takes a minute to load, you're going to get a table that will pop up that will have all of this data, this anxiety data that you've clicked, it will present that data to you and you can export that as an Excel. So you can have all the anxiety data at the county level in an Excel sheet for you to do. Well, you won't have the data, the raw data, you will have the analyzed data, but you will have that to do with as you wish. So you can definitely do that. But like I said, it always takes a minute to load, so we're not gonna wait for that here. But that's sort of a rundown of how to utilize the mapping tool. If that is still confusing to you, we do have a document on the website that is a guide for the mapping tool. So you can click on this and it will do sort of a step by step. And then we're also going to be adding a like 2-minute video as well that you can click on to kind of do exactly what I just did here. Um, if you're confused about how to use the mapping tool. So the other thing that I want to show you before I open it up for questions is I want to acknowledge that this data resource, the Essentials PACE website, is not the be-all end-all of data for the state of Georgia. There's a lot of other data out there. We might not have what you're looking for. Again, maybe you don't want to reach out to us for whatever reason. That's fine. Although, please do. We're nice people. We're fun. We're a good time. We're happy to help you. I do have another resource that I want you guys to be familiar with, and that is the Georgia Essentials Data Hub. So this is a new resource that went live a couple of months ago. I'm going to drop the link to it in the chat so you can bookmark it. This lives on Georgia State University's website on the Prevent Child Abuse Georgia / Positive Childhood Alliance when they go through their name change in a couple of weeks. It's housed on their website and it was created by Georgia Essentials for Childhood. So you definitely want to bookmark this because this is essentially a list of data that is good and high quality that the data working group at Georgia Essentials has vetted, and that has data that is specific about Georgia at a variety of different geographical levels, about a variety of different populations. So here is kind of a sort of a quick overview of what types of data you can find on the tool. So the idea behind this tool is that we're showing you data that you can look at, but then we're also giving you information about that data and how to use it. So you can take a look at this. You can email Essentials if you've got questions about the Data Hub, if you have questions about any of the data. You can also email Essentials. That will go to the data working group. Unfortunately for you, if you don't like me, I'm one of the co-chairs of the data working group, so you would have to talk to me probably about answering your question. But I promise I am fun. So who doesn't like rice? Thank you, Beth. Well, I know you like me. But it's okay. Not everybody has to be a fan. We also have some good resources on how to utilize data and some information about sort of ethics of collecting data and things like that that you'd want to take a look at. But this is actually the cool thing, which this is our table of these data sources that we've vetted. So up here at the top, this column shows you sort of the name of the data source. This will tell you the type of data that's available. So is this data raw, meaning that you can download the data, but no analysis has been done? So you would have to do any analysis that you would want to do in Excel or SAS or R or whatever. Or do they also provide you with a summary? Have they done some analysis for you and you can just read what they're doing? Or if it's query type data. So this will tell you what type of data is available on the website, and so for a query type data, that is kind of going to be where you can manipulate the data on the website to answer specific pre-generated questions that the website has. That's kind of what we're meaning by that. Then we go over at what geographic level the data is available at. So county, state, national, zip code level, that's all going to be here. So you can check that out. And then over here, We have just some very general, this is the kind of data that you'll see here. So for example, on Whiskers, which is a CDC data source, you're going to be able to find child abuse and neglect and child, family, and well-being data related to physical health, mental health, economics, child abuse and neglect awareness, those kinds of things. So that's what this indicator here means, that it's going to give you a very broad overview of what kind of data is available on there. So you can click on any one of these and then boom, you will get, oh yeah, so if you click on this, what's going to happen is it's going to take you down the page to a card for that data resource. So I clicked on the Georgia Cross Agency Data System, or CADIS. This is actually a really great data resource. This provides you with a short description of what that data is. Again, it gives you those indicators, and then you can actually click here and be taken to the home page of where that data is. So you definitely want to have this resource bookmark. This is a great place for you to go to if you're trying to start with, where do I ask questions about this data? Where can I find it? You definitely want to bookmark this. Now, I will say, we plan on updating this roughly twice a year for the data working group. So, you can expect that we will be kind of doing our best to add new data resources that we find, to update things, because surveys can change. They can change the questions that they're asking. A survey can be canceled, for example, and replaced with another survey. That's something we're experiencing with the Georgia Student Health Survey. The Georgia Student Health Survey no longer is being conducted, but a different survey called the Georgia School Climate Survey is being conducted in its stead, that asks similar questions, not all the same questions, but is kind of a replacement for it, just to give you an example. So you can expect that once we start getting that school climate survey data, that will also be listed up here as another resource. So make sure that you have this saved. If you have questions about this, again, you can email Essentials. You can also, again, email me, doesn't matter. Anything kind of related to ACEs data is most likely eventually going to come across my inbox if you've got a question. Um, Going back to my slides, I don't think I have too much else from current slide. So next is just, yeah, like a visual representation of some things that you can find. And then, yeah, if you have any questions, if you've got a data problem that you're trying to solve, we can brainstorm about it now. If something I said did not make sense, feel free to ask me about it. Or if you have another data resource that you want to share with folks, we can talk about that as well. This is my email and my bona fides. So you can feel free to write that down, or like I said, this is all going to be available as slides or as a PDF for you to check out in the future. Oh, thank you, Fozia. I know you like me too. I also like you. Oh, I haven't seen you in a while. It's nice to see you. Yeah. Okay, great. So that that was kind of it for me talking at you. So if you all have questions, feel free to ask. If you don't want to ask the question to the larger group, you can send me a private message in the chat. Or if you just want to talk, not in this space, again, email me, reach out to me. Please help me continue to explain why this grant is valid and needed in the state of Georgia by utilizing the resources that we offer and asking us questions. Yeah, so questions, thoughts, comments?
Grace, thank you for all you do. And a quick question, there used to be that fact sheet, and is that going to be available, or?
Yeah, so the one on our website.
There you go.
Yes, yeah, those are still here. They're down here. The DFACS regional fact sheets are still available. The last time we updated these was last year, so we'll probably be updating these again with new data by the start of the summer.
Okay, so there's not gonna, I think I remember this. It's just gonna be regional. It's not gonna be for the whole state.
Yeah, it's just going to be regional. Now, what I will say is, and the grant does a lot of stuff. Another project that we're working on is with Resilient Georgia, which is an absolutely incredible organization here in the state. We are working with Resilient Georgia to create another set of ACE profiles for them and their partners, and that will include an overview state profile on ACEs as well. We're in the process of creating those. They should start coming out within the next couple of months. So we will have like a more traditional fact sheet overview of ACEs in the state overall. But the other thing is that in the next 6 weeks, when we upload when we change the website and include our data dashboard, the homepage for the data dashboard is actually going to be an overview of ACEs in the state of Georgia. So that will be there as well. Yeah, so the dashboard is going to have kind of 3, 4-ish components. The homepage is going to be an overview of the types of data that we're offering on the dashboard. And then I had the brilliant, but not super brilliant, it's kind of like duh, idea last week to add a table on the homepage that lists every data indicator that is on the dashboard. So you can just see from the start if there's a piece of data that you would be interested in. And then the second page, the links to the other links in the dashboard will have data on ACE risk and protective factors, and then data on social determinants of health. And so you'll kind of click away from the homepage for that. One of the other things about the data dashboard that we are very excited about is well, 2 things. So one, we're going to be stratifying some of the data. So by that I mean that if it is if the type of data that we have and if the quality of the data is good enough, we will be able to show you things like sex on the Georgia Student Health Survey. So girl said this, boy said this. Unfortunately, those are the only 2 options on the Georgia Student Health Survey for sex, so we wouldn't be able to talk about non-binary or trans youth. But we do have that. And then we will also be providing with each data indicator that you're able to click on, we're also going to provide some information on why that data indicator is relevant to child and family well-being, what types of evidence-based practices are related to that data indicator, and then we're going to go into more detailed explanation about what this data indicator is actually telling us so that it can be used, so that the chances of it being misunderstood are smaller. So we're really trying to do a much better job of doing a better job of explaining the data in the way that we present it with the dashboard. So we're really excited about that. I hope that answered your question, Fozia. I kind of went off on a little tangent there, but yes, we will have in 2 different ways a state level profile on ACEs, one with our partnership with Resilient Georgia that will kind of be a really long profile on ACEs in the state, and then the second on our data dashboard, the homepage will have overall state ACE data on there. Other questions or comments from folks? All right, I have waited the presenters 15-20 seconds of an awkward pause. Kimberly dropped in the chat a link for an evaluation and a certificate of attendance if that is something that you are looking for this. So make sure that you grab that if that is part of what you want to do. In the evaluation, feel free to let me know what you liked, what you didn't like. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I thrive on constructive criticism, so feel free to provide your true thoughts. And then yeah, again, email me, reach out. Myself and my team are here to help provide you with the data that you need to the degree that that data exists. So don't be shy about chatting with us or using our resources or letting us know what it is that you'd like to see. Thank you, Kimberly. Is there anything else
I
that
just
we?
wanted to thank you, Grace, so much for your extremely informative presentation. I know for me, data can be intimidating and a challenge to digest. So this approach to the topic definitely lifts that veil. And we just want to thank you for all the amazing work that you do. So yes, I've placed in the chat the link for the certificate for the evaluation and certificate of attendance. So it's a two-step process. After you click submit for the evaluation, you will see the link to receive your certificate of attendance. And then you'll click that link and fill out that form to receive that. In the email, it will say that this webinar will be up tomorrow. Give us a few days, please. So if you go to the webinar page, in a few days, you'll be able to see the recording of this and the PDF to the presentation. And we thank you all for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was lovely to spend some time with you. Thank you for listening to me, and thank you for all the work that you do. Really looking forward to helping you out in the ways that we can. I hope everybody has a great day, stays safe, does something that brings you happiness and joy, and do not forget to email me if you need something.
And I'll stay on just for a little bit if people want to get that, click onto that evaluation link.
Yeah, I'll stay on for a few minutes too in case folks want to talk without everybody else being here.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great remainder of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm shocked that we weren't interrupted by a cat.
I was waiting for it. Oh, let
Yeah.
me stop recording as well.
Well, I put Artemis in my bedroom because she was being a nuisance.